Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming for today's event. We want to commemorate May 24th, the Day of the Bulgarian Education and Culture and the Slavic alphabet. And as a surprise, before we to start the announced program, we have Bulgarian Voices of Seattle.
Hello? Is this audible? Yes. Yeah. Via microphone? Yes. Good, good. Fantastic. Hello, we're the Bulgarian Voices of Seattle Women's Choir. And we wanted to share a little bit about our story. We were founded in 2011 by the wonderful Mary Sherhart, which is 12 years ago, and we have continued to perform every year since. Our current director is the fantastic Michael Lawson. And he is also an incredibly talented accordion player, and he will accompany us in all of the songs as well. We enjoy performing at many local events such as Balkan Night, Crossroads, and Folk Life, and we actually have a full-length concert this weekend at 11:30 at the Fountain Lawn stage, so come and see us for a full concert. As you can see, we all wear traditional outfits called nosia, and they vary in color and style across Bulgaria. These are all traditional, but from different regions. And for us today, it's a really great honor to commence this very exciting event. We will share with you 3 traditional folk songs from Bulgaria. The first one is called Syotomie Moatezia, and it is from the Rhodope region of Bulgaria, which is the mountainous region to the south. And in this song, it tells of a tailor who makes a beautiful red dress for a girl named Marushka. Next we have a audible, right? I just cannot hear myself, so I want to make sure I'm audible. Sorry. So next we have a lively song called Pojdok Rano na Pazar, and this one is from the Shop region, which is located near the capital of Sofia. In this song, a young woman went early to the market and found herself a rooster with golden wings in exchange for a gold coin. This song is a cumulative song like the 12 Days of Christmas. By the end, she's also found herself a calf with big horns, a sheep with golden fleece, and a nice young man. Where you want to start dancing, isn't it? All right, we have one more song, and so now we're going to go east to the Yangon region, and we're going to sing the song Mari Mome Hubava. It tells of a smitten young man saying, "Hey, you beautiful girl, look me in the eyes. You calm my soul and light my heart on fire. I will take you back to my village and make you my bride." Also, thank you so much for listening to us today.
Thank you.
Baba,
Day of the Bulgarian Education and Culture and the Slavic alphabet. In the next couple of minutes, I would like to tell you actually the story based on proven historical facts, how it happened that we do have Bulgarian alphabet. My name is Ivan Tashev. I'm a partner software architect in this building for Microsoft Corporation, but I'm also co-president of the Bulgarian Culture and Heritage Center of Seattle, which organizes this event. Okay, let's return back, a little back around the 4th century, and we'll see that most of the territory around the Mediterranean Sea is taken by the Roman Empire, enormously large and powerful country for the time. And because of its size, already we have two centers of power, Rome and Constantinople. And the division of the Roman Empire in East and West Roman Empire already has started. Meantime, in parallel, the Christianity as dominant religion in the Roman Empire started to propagate, but also, based on purely political reasons, we have a half of the Roman Empire teaching Christianity using Latin, and the eastern part of the Roman Empire teaching Christianity using Greek, also for the same political reasons. In the meantime, around this 2nd, 4th century, this big, enormously powerful country started to be shaken by invaders, tribes which arrive from various directions, and they go and try to burn everything, to steal everything, what you can expect with tribe with the name Vandals. Actually, the word came from there. What is not on this map, however, is a bunch of tribes which, instead of burning everything and stealing everything peacefully, migrate from northeast and start to settle here to process the land and to pay taxes. Peaceful, nice people, all of those are the Slavic tribes. And 200 years later, the map of Europe is completely different. First, what happened is that another tribe, also warriors, came from northeast. The tribe of Bulgarians. In 681, they established the Bulgarian state, which at the time is one of the most largest and the most powerful countries in Europe. That's not worth much because you have another very large and powerful country, Byzantine Empire, and pretty much the entire Bulgarian medieval history is clashes with Byzantine Empire, wars, and from time to time helping each other in case of external invaders. Some actually learned this in a hard way. However, still, the friction and the fight for influence between the West Roman Empire, or what's left of it, and Byzantium is around here. See, there is a Slavic tribe called Moravians, which is on the territory of today's Czech Republic. And what happened is that those two brothers, Cyril and Methodius, which are born in Thessaloniki in today's Greece, their father had been actually the governor of the entire region, and their mothers came to be Bulgarian. They received one of the best possible educations at the time in so-called University of Magnur in Constantinople. Their father died when they had been very young, 14, 15 years old, and they took, after graduating from this university, the career path of being priests. In 863rd year, the Moravian Prince Rostislav requested a help for baptizing the local Slavs, which for Byzantium is a win. It is moving the influence territory towards west. So they have been sent on that trip, and to baptize successfully the Slavs in today's Czech Republic, then Moravia, they have to overcome several obstacles. The first is that at the time only 3 languages, so-called the 3 saint languages, are allowed to teach Christianity: Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So they really wanted to translate all of the Christian books on the native language of Slavs which lived in then Moravia. For this, they had to do 2 things. First, to create an alphabet. This is so-called glagolitic script, or in Bulgarian glagolica. So they created this alphabet using portions of the Greek, portions of the Roman alphabet, and then they standardized the language of those church book, which is known as Old Church Slavonic. And then the 2 brothers translated the New Testament, the Psalms, the Old Testament, and several other books, and started to teach Christianity to the local Moravians. That didn't went unnoticed from the Roman Empire, so they decided and went to Rome to defend the right of every single human being to hear the God's words in their own language. And this happened in 867-68. They had actually a very warm welcome by the Pope Adrian II, because they realized that this is further propagation of Christianity and baptizing more and more people. And Methodius obtained the priesthood by Pope himself. Their disciples also get their religious ranks as priests and deacons. Unfortunately, at the end of this trip, Cyril died on February 14, 1869, and he is buried in a San Clemente Basilica in Rome, and this is a picture of his tomb. And here is pretty much every year prime ministers of the Slavic countries who use the Cyrillic came here and put flowers. So then Methodius returned back to Moravia, but very soon after that the politics changed. The Rostislav, the prince, was overthrown by his nephew Svatopluk. And in 1870, Methodius had been imprisoned for 2.5 years. And after Pope's intervention, he was released, but still, after 8 years, he has been summoned to Rome and charged on heresy and using Slavonic. In short, the western part of the Christian church won in Moravia. Methodius died on April 6, 885, and as Archbishop of Moravia, he has his own file in the archives of the Roman Catholic Church, where it says that Methodius has been buried in the main cathedral of the capital of Moravia. Unfortunately, we don't know which of the large cities of Moravia have been the capital, so the tomb of Methodius is not known. We don't know when he's buried. Anyway, at the time, Bulgarian Empire is spanning almost the entire Balkan Peninsula, and Bulgarian Tsar Boris I, or the baptizer, acquired Christianity from Byzantine Empire in 864. The purpose and the goal of the Bulgarian Tsar was to unite the Bulgarian people, which at that time had basically 3 distinct parts. The local, the root population of the Balkans, Thracian tribes, the Slavic tribes which settled in 3rd, 4th, 5th century, and the Bulgarians themselves which entered the peninsula in 7th century. So the goal of Boris was everybody to have the same religion, to clean all of the difference between the tribes, and to have one unified nation. Unfortunately, all of the priests have to be trained in Byzantine Empire, and all of the services in the churches have been in Greek. This opens a serious problem with the national security. Your main opponent on the battlefield trains your intellectual elite. And this is why when the disciples of Cyril and Methodius have been expelled in Moravia, they headed back to Byzantium, the country which sent them. They have been warmly welcomed by Boris I, and you see an icon actually showing how Boris first welcomes them on the territory of Bulgaria. They have been split on two groups and tasked to create two theological schools in the two ends of the country, one in Ohrid Literary School and one in Preslav, then the capital of the Bulgarian Empire. Which happened, and they started to train and to teach the priests in Bulgarian language. And in the process they found that Glagolic script is very, very complex. The language is kind of different, that's not exactly Bulgarian. So they created a new alphabet, tailored for the Bulgarian language and called it Cyrillic alphabet. And you can see that the script is easier to write and read. The religious books have been adapted to the Bulgarian language that has been spoken in the territory of Bulgaria at the time, and this is so-called a New Church Slavonic, also known as just a Church Slavonic. In Bulgarian, it's a common Slavianski язык. And the son of Boris the first Tsar Simeon the Great, actually formalized the new alphabet, formalized the books, and this is what is basically used in Bulgarian churches till today. One important consequence of having an alphabet tailored to your own language is that around that time we have the first samples of non-religious writings. This is the origins of the Bulgarian literature. People started to tell stories which are not related to the church, not related to the religion. What happened next? Meantime, in the northeast, another large country appeared, and this is Kievan Rus. This is the first state of Russian tribes with capital Kiev. And Prince Oleg had the same problem. He wanted to unify his people, accepted the Christianity in 867, and also have been constantly in war with Byzantine Empire. The solution, the same. They just sent people, took the translated in Bulgarian, in the old New Church Slavonic Christian books, and didn't even bother to translate it to Russian because the languages have been quite similar. Also, the Cyrillic alphabet started to propagate initially on the Balkans for Slavic and non-Slavic countries. Well known is the Bosnian Cyrillic, a non-Slavic tribe, known as Bosanica. And also, Cyrillic alphabet have been used in Romania till 860. Today, many languages on the Balkans and Eastern Europe and in Northern Eurasia actually are using the Cyrillic alphabet. This is the only alphabet in Bulgaria, Russia, Serbia, North Macedonia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And during the times of the Soviet Union, that script was modified for the use in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, other countries. So today, it is actually wider spread, not only among Slavic languages and Slavic countries. Around that time, May 24th started to be celebrated as the Saint Cyril and Methodius Day. Most of those countries that use the Cyrillic script have their own name for the celebration, mostly related to Saint Methodius and Cyril. In Bulgaria, the official name is Bulgarian Education and Culture and Slavic Script Day. The Christian Church of Bulgaria decided that this celebration is not that much religious, so they moved the day of Saint Cyril and Methodius 14 days earlier, on May 11. So today, May 24th, is a purely civic celebration of the Cyrillic alphabet and the Bulgarian education and culture. And I went with a map of the world where it shows countries that use Cyrillic as a primary script, countries where the script coexists, and in some countries it is slightly being replaced by the Latin alphabet. Overall today, around almost 1.5 billion people use the Cyrillic alphabet, created many, many, many years ago on the territory of the first Bulgarian Empire. Thank you for your attention. So our next speaker is Martin Koenig. He is a founding director of Ethnic Folk Arts Center, and he's a leading supporter and advocate for community-based traditional arts and authoritative European ethnic dance traditions. His experience in folk arts fieldwork has included extensive research, filming, photographing, and recording in ethnic communities in the US and in the rural areas of Southeast Europe. His films and recordings are being issued by Smithsonian Folkways Recording, and his archive films are in the Smithsonian Museum today and in the Library of Congress. Before to give the floor to Martin, a couple of words about the video we're going to show in parallel. Photographs are very elusive creatures. It's very difficult to have a picture of them because they're behind the camera. So I went and looked at the recordings and films Martin did and cut a very limited number of scripts and photographs. So the video is titled Martin Koenig to Work. Martin, you have the floor.
Hello. First off, you know, when Ivan invited me to come to speak, I thought it would give me a good opportunity to thank all of you who are in the room, as I know some are, who contributed to my Bulgarian project, which resulted in a 144-page book with more than 100 photographs, 37 tracks of traditional Bulgarian music that I recorded in the 1960s up through 1979. And it's an aspect of Bulgaria that is very difficult to find now. They're just remnants of that world. It's just a different musical form, and I thought it was an important form for Bulgarian community here in America and Bulgarian communities abroad to have more of a sense of what the palette is of Bulgarian music and Bulgarian dance. And so I underwent doing this project. So I want to thank the center, I want to thank Ivan, I want to thank Elka, who's not here, I want to thank the board, I want to thank the members, and anyone else who's not part of the center who also participated in this or think it's a good idea. I'll thank you as well. So I've been giving talks, mostly on the East Coast, about this project as book launches for the Smithsonian. And I got together with Ivan and we sat down and I told Ivan, well, this is what I do. Ivan, I come in and I talk about coming back to Bulgaria 50 years after I worked there, more than 50 years after I worked there in some cases, and searching for and finding the families of those artists that I recorded to get their permission, to pay them an honoraire, and get permission from the family to issue their grandmother's or grandfather's recording of music or dance or songs. And Ivan says, Martin, stop. I would start from scratch, he said. And I'll quote him. My community wants to know, how does an American decide to travel to Bulgaria and the Balkans at the height of the Cold War? Why does he go there? How does he go there? When did you work there? How could you work there at that time? You should show photos of yourself This is all from Ivan, from whatever I could pull together and he could find. Where did you go? Tell us what you did each year. What have you collected? What have you published? Who are you? And in addition, what is your impression of the area? And you've got 15 minutes to say it. So that's a very difficult task. But I think that's a fair enough request, because I know people cannot understand how did that happen. And sometimes I can't understand it either, because it was not planned. It was all on the spur of the moment. It was not a 5-year plan. There was no organized effort towards this. So to start with, how does an American decide to travel to Bulgaria and the Balkans? I didn't just work in Bulgaria. I worked in Romania, I worked in Croatia, I worked in Macedonia, I worked in Kosovo, I worked in Romania, did I say, and Serbia, and Greece. But I didn't work in Greece at that time, I worked in Greece later. First off, I'm a child of Jewish immigrants who emigrated to America from what was called Poland before and is now called Ukraine. My mother came when she was 17 years of age in 1921, and my father came about 9 years later in 1930. So American is in quotes, just like your children will be Americans, but in quotes. Those of you who are Bulgarians are born in another country. And actually, if you scratch a little bit for any person in this country, somewhere there's an immigrant, whether it's a parent, a grandparent, or a great-grandparent. You'll find someone came over from somewhere else. So the stories my father told me as a child were not American stories. The stories he told me were stories, European stories. He worked in the forests for a Canadian company that even at that time there was outsourcing happening, and he came here because the Depression had hit there, and the forest, the work closed down. My mother came back to Europe to visit her family, and they got married, and she brought him over. And the stories were when he served in the Polish cavalry, when he worked in the forests, when his family fled from where the war was being fought on their land in the First World War. And so that takes care of the story of this American. I went to an all-boys high school in Manhattan. It's a very famous school because I think it has the most Nobel Prize winners that came out of the school. I was not anywhere near any of those people. However, it had some fame in that way. It's Stuyvesant High School. And some boys from the school decided when we were seniors, let's go to this place, Community Church on 35th Street and Park Avenue, and there's a dance happening there. And I said, okay, we're gonna go and meet some girls. And we went there, and it was the first time I'd ever folk danced. And I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing that I've ever seen. And when I went to university the following year, I joined the folk dance club there. And the next 4 years of my college education, I went dancing regularly, wherever and whenever I could. And so I came with if university is to get you in touch with your passion, it certainly succeeded in my case. What to do with it, since there were no jobs that you can do with folk dancing, is another story. So I'm going to go quickly through this because I've only got, 12 minutes left? I graduated from City University in New York in 1959, and not having a clue as to what to do with my life, I went to Europe, hitchhiking and working my way on boats to go from one place to another. I drove cars, and that was my first taste of the former Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, where I was 2 days going through to Turkey, and Greece. I was one of a group of young people in the 60s who were smitten by izvorny music. Izvorny is original from the source for non-Bulgarians. But I'm not just talking about Bulgarian izvorny music. I'm talking, what I was smitten by was Southern, white, and African American music, as many people, young as myself, were smitten by it also. Never had exposure to it either. And all of a sudden we hear this music, and then you have the Newport Folk Festival, and you have different folk festivals taking place. So at that time I heard Boris Karloff for the first time, and I was smitten by his music. He was just fabulous, and then his father was even more fabulous. So I got a taste of what Bulgarian music, though I knew nothing about it. Not knowing what to do, I fell back upon going to teach in a high school in Lower Manhattan, which I did for the next 5 years after I returned from Europe. And this high school boasted that it had the most nationalities in any school in Manhattan. It had more than 80 nationalities in the student body. And the school was also unique in that it taught Russian and Chinese language. All teachers at that time were encouraged to provide after-school activities, and since I love folk dance, I said, oh, I'll start a folk dance club. And I found 100 kids came into this folk dance club, not knowing what they were coming to. They had me as a teacher, or they liked me, and I was a very young guy. I was just 5 or 6 years older than them. I was 23 or so at the time. And 2 of the students who came from my homeroom class, and one was Emil Anastasov, and the other was Mitko Konstantinov. 2 Bulgarian boys, and as far as I was concerned, they were 2 of the 80 nationalities that were in the school. I knew nothing about Bulgaria, except I passed through it 2 days when there was a huge fog that I couldn't see anything, a smell of lignite, coal. It was a September, I remember it so vividly. And you had hundreds of men chipping away at the stones that were at that, I mean now I think all of Bulgaria is asphalted, but before the asphalt was set down, there are these beautiful little stones that were put all across the highways. And all the countries in the 50s and 60s were building roads to bring tourists and to bring people to see each other. And I think it was part of the way to not have another war break out in the future, to get familiar with other people from other countries. And I was just very impressed with these beautiful little stones. So at that time in the school, Emil, he sat right in front of me. I had my teacher's desk here, where Ivan is sitting, Emil was sitting, and one morning, as we're preparing everything and we're waiting to hear the bell ring, he says, Mr. Koenig, I have a question for you. If you love folk dance so much, why don't you go to where folk dance emanates from? Why don't you go to Bulgaria? I said, boy, that's pretty profound. Why didn't I think of that? And I hadn't. At the same time, there was a special dance workshop. It was the first dance workshop of a foreign teacher coming to America to teach that I was exposed to. And it was Atanas Komarovsky, if those people here know, Macedonian dancer from Skopje, and Dennis Boxell, who was a local teacher, American quote unquote, who was translating for him. And I went to the workshop, and I had never heard music like that, so varied. I'd never seen anyone teaching dance in such a way. It was so beautiful to watch as a dancer, it was lyrical as a dancer, and I wanted to be Atanas. So the next week I went back to my high school, and I got together with Emil and Mitko, and I said, Okay, boys, how do I do this? How do I go about? Who do I contact? Where do I go to? How can I do this finding folk dances? Where do I find this? And calmly, the 17-year-old Emil, I tried to look for a photograph. I have a photograph, and I couldn't find it. He calmly says to me, well, Mr. Koenig, you go to the Komitet Zawirsky Chuzhbina, and they will take care of you. What Komitet? Komitet? Just an unknown, there was no such agency in this country. I didn't understand what he was talking about. It turned out Emil's father was the head of the Bulgarian Commercial Counselor's Office on 42nd Street in New York City. And there were several Bulgarian boys from the Bulgarian officials that were going to this school, and I assume it's because of Russian and Chinese, but I don't know, that's just my assumption. I never met Emil's father, but Mitko was here working for his uncle. And his uncle was a man, a doctor, an eye, ear, and throat specialist named Zhivko Angelushev. And Zhivko Angelushev was up there in years at this point, so the family sent him this boy, Mitko, and there he is, that's Mitko there. And he was there to help his uncle. And I got together with his uncle, who was very encouraging and said, look, Martin, I have a brother in Sofia. He is a very famous artist. He's Boris Angelushev. He will take care of you. You go to him, I will write a letter for you, you will take it to him, deliver it to him, and it'll all be taken care of. So, being an optimist that I am, I quit teaching high school because I was completely burned out by that time. And that spring, I contacted Sarah Lawrence College that was looking for a dance teacher of folk dance. And I applied, and I got the job. And as soon as I got that job, the dance program at Barnard College at Columbia University called me, a woman named Roosevelt, one of the Roosevelt family, Jeanette Roosevelt, and offered me a job over the phone. And I took that job as well, and that's the photographs that you see. Teaching is in the dance studio at Columbia, Barnard. And in May of 1966, I left for Bulgaria and for the Balkans. I left for Boris Angelushev, I left for Atanas Komarovsky, and I never looked back. My parents were terrified, and they thought I was going to be financially unstable, which I was for quite a few years. And to some of you here, Microsoft engineers, your children may make a decision like this also, because it skips a generation when that interest returns and they want to really get into where they come from, who they are, what is their culture. And it may not even be Bulgarian culture that they'll go to. I have no connection to Bulgaria, but they have a connection to Europe. They may have a connection to something else. So be understanding and be patient. 60 years ago, America was a very different place than what you find here now. Most of you, 60 years ago, weren't here. You're looking around and seeing the age of most of you. There was no such thing as world music. There was no appreciation for world music. There was no such thing that was relevant, of interest. You couldn't hear it on the radio unless you went past the dial that nobody went to. And then you hear there would be ethnic radio stations. And of course I found them, and that was one thing that got me involved in. In the US, we were just starting to be interested in our quote-unquote, which means Southern white and African American music. And black and white old-time music. But in the 1960s, big changes were coming, and it wasn't just the hippies and the yippies, but it also was a total opening of America to the world. It was open to Indian music, which was very popular. It was open to East European foreign films that were very popular. Not so much Bulgarian, but Hungarian, Polish films, Czech films. And foreign cars were coming here, importing lots of foreign cars. 60 years ago, Bulgaria was a very different place. So, Ivan said I should share with you some experiences I had in Bulgaria and the Balkans and other parts there. I went to Bulgaria in 1966. I bought a Volkswagen bus. I took out the back seats. I put in a platform. I put in a bed, a 3-inch foam cushion. And I thought I'd save money that way, sleep in the back of the car, park on the street. I don't have to go to a hotel. Underneath the platform, I had my films, my cameras, and everything would stay cool, and it would be protected in that way. And first night I came in, got into Sofia, parked, I think it must have been downtown, next to a park. And in the middle of the night I hear, up and I go to the window, I go to the door, there are 2 policemen. Ne može, ne može. I don't speak Bulgarian. Ne može. Anyway, I got the message. I understood what they were saying. I didn't quite understand why, but I got the message, so I left from that place. I went to a side street and further away from the center of town. And now, one problem was there were no cars in Sofia. 0. The only cars that were in Sofia were government cars, and they usually had garages where they parked at night. So my car was right in the middle, right next to a park. I mean, you couldn't have a clearer picture of what is this doing here? And of course it would provoke these policemen to come in and say, you can't park here. This is unheard of. So that was my first experience there. Between 1962 and 1987, I took more than a dozen field trips to the Balkans. Each year, between 1966 and 1970, I worked in Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania, Serbia, and Macedonia, and Kosovo as well. I filmed 16mm film. I taped music. I went to the Komitet. I went to the various Komitets in all the countries of the Balkans. They all received me well. They weren't, I shouldn't say that. Pardon? Oh yeah, well, some people thought, of course, I was a spy. I mean, one person, well, I introduced myself, well, Boris Angelushev called the Komitet. The Komitet called the Institute za Muzika on Polyanov Street. The Institute za Muzika director received me. He passed me on to Raina Katsarova, Anya Ilieva, and Virgilii Atanasov, 3 people. Those would be my people. And they were there to assist me. So every day I went, that I was in Sofia, I went and spent several hours watching films, and they had great films that were there. Listened to music, and afterwards I would go to see Raina Katsarova in her house, because she had just retired, and she would come to me periodically and say, Martin, this woman at this agency said that you do not teach at Columbia University, that this is a lie. You must take your letters from the university, you must go to her directly and say, why do you say this about me? Which is what I did. I would take my letters, which had a stamp, which made it valid, is what I found out. And I would produce the letter to this person, and the person would say, but Martin, I never said such a thing. I said, well, I was just told to come by, someone was just at a meeting with you, earlier today, Martin, I never said so. So I would get some people like that, but by and large, I must say, for every person that closed the door or felt that way towards me, on the level, the lower level of people I was in touch with, officialdom, and people, on the people level, I was very well received, no matter what the politics were of the people. And I found that everywhere. I found that everywhere. Now, I was the first American that was there. So that's a very special, I'm thinking back, that's a very special position to be in. They weren't tired of the Americans yet. Because, who is this? Because everyone's curious. Who is this guy? And, you know, I was pretty loose, I was pretty open, and I was available. So, a day in Sofia. I would start the day, I'd have breakfast at a local yogurt shop, which, working class, they'd have aluminum bowls, and a bun, with sugar on top of the bun. And the yogurt was extraordinary. It's very hard to eat American yogurt after you've had Bulgarian. It's very difficult. And the first surprise I had when I went back there in 2005 was they didn't have Bulgarian yogurt. They only had Dannon yogurt. I couldn't believe it. It was just like, what happened here? And of course, I think a lot of people asked, what happened here? So after that, I went to a dance class, which was arranged from the Komitet, with Krasimir Petrov or Reni Stefanova at the Railway Workers Building. And I'd spend an hour and a half dancing. Then I went to the Institut Muzika on Polyanov Street, worked with Ani Overgili. Afterwards, I would have lunch at the vegetarian restaurant on Graf Ignatiev. Big restaurant. I don't think it's there anymore. But it was just wonderful. And I could not eat some of the greasy food that was in the ballrooms. But the vegetarian restaurant, I loved the concoctions they had, the imagination and the creativity of what you can do with food. And I think that we just in America have come to this realization that you can have a vegetarian or a near-vegetarian diet that's very imaginative and very creative. After that, I would go to visit with Raina Katsarova at a home in a garden, which was around the corner from the Institute. Then I would visit with Rumiana Tsintsarska or Krasimir Ivanova at the Radio Sofia. And then I would grab something to eat again, and then I would go to a rehearsal with Georgy Dimitrov Dance Ensemble. And that was my day, with variations. And I worked every day I was there doing that. So, Ivan, tell me when I'm to stop. I should stop? Okay, let me just finish this up to say several things. One, I can't stop. A day in the field.
We can stop here.
A day in the field was, I would announce to the Komitet what I wanted to do. I would call up, and the person I had was a jewel of a person. Evgenia Kamova was her name. And she was, a jewel of a person. And I don't know what she said to the rest of the committee, the Komitet, but she had magic. She had a magical tongue, and she was very convincing. Wherever I wanted to go, I was allowed to go. They would give me a letter. What did they call it? Commanderovka. With a stamp. And I would go to a village, and I would introduce myself to whoever the official was, Communist Party, secretary, school, teacher, cultural agency, whoever they introduced me to. Sometimes I go to Sliven, and in Sliven I would introduce myself to the office. They would send a person from that office with me to the village. All this is greatly appreciated because it's all, I could not do any of this myself. I didn't have the language skills, especially at the beginning. And they knew who to ask. they would come to the village and they would gather the people who were the singers, they would gather the people who were the dancers, and I would film and I would tape them. And we had a good time. I mean, I was an American, I had a sense of humor, we had fun. They were getting off from work, not working there. Anyway, so that would be, and only twice, 2 times in the 5 years that I worked there, going to, I would say, more than 200 villages that I worked in. Only 2 times was I told, leave, get out of here, we don't want you. One time was when Evgeny Kamova invited me to leave Romania to come traveling down to Sliven to a Hajduk festival. He says, Martin, this will be very special for you. So I picked myself up, got in my Volkswagen bus, drove all the way down to the Hajduk Fest, picked up Virgili Atanasov at the Institute to come with me, went out there, letter, Commanderovka, stamp and everything, and I see everybody is military. Everybody's dressed in a military uniform. It's in the mountains, in Sliven, and we go up there and Virgili presents everything, he speaks, and then Virgili turns to me and says, let's go. Doesn't speak, just let's go. See your car, let's go. And we left and we went to Zazovo for the next week, and clearly I was not welcome in that place. And I understand, they were military guys, every country would do the same thing. The other one was that I went, when I approached the Komitet to do 2 recordings, commercial recordings for Western audiences in America, but they wouldn't have to spend anything. I would need them to give me a folklorist to come with me. They would have to translate these songs that I would record and give me that material, but that I would have full control. Me and my colleague Ethel Rain, the 2 of us would have full control over what goes on with these records. They agreed to it. I mean, they were wonderful. And I came home and I did whatever I thought was great music, and one of the pieces on that record was Valia Balkanska singing about Delia the Hajduk. That's where the record was played. And that's where, when Carl Sagan was looking to put a recording up on the Voyager, he only put Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Stravinsky, and such. To which American folklorist Alan Lomax said, he had a fit. He said, that's not music of the world's people. Music of the world's people is the world's people. Not these composers of elite art forms. Carl Sagan, in his wisdom, said, okay, we'll add a second gold record. We'll have the 1 record of the classical music, and we'll do it a second record of 27 selections of people's music. And then Tim Ferriss and Carl Sagan sat down. They went to Tower Records, as I'll leave it to Kenneth to say. I won't say anything. Let me just say one last thing. Something that I went online to look at what might be being said about Valia Balkanska. And it keeps saying Martin Koenig recorded her. Now, I was half the team, but there was another person, and that was Ethel Rain. The 2 of us recorded her. And it's important to also note that it was Ethel who went to the first Caprichitsa, because Ethel is a singer. The way I was enthusiastic with dance, I found a kindred soul enthusiastic about singing. And she's the first one that went around this country in the 60s, as I was going around this country in the 60s, teaching Balkan dancing. She was teaching Balkan singing, including Bulgarian singing. She understood how to get that sound out of somebody. And it was Ethel who said, Marty, we gotta have Valia Balkanska on this record. And I said, let me hear her. And we listened to her, and I said, absolutely. And the only unhappiness I have is Up until that time, the only person I heard who sang that song was Nadezhda Koynova, who was a fabulous singer. And it's unfortunate I hear nothing about her anymore. And Valia is a great singer, but Nadezhda Koynova was also a great singer. So, thank you very much.
What we're going to do now is to show you a compilation of Martin's photographs.
And then the recordings that I made also.
And the background music are recordings made by Martin.
İncinara bana sesidira bölümden eden yavrumu İncinar bakrağı bakenin Cemilona şirer dalimden eden bölüm oku Gengide bara
Tvoji dragi vođa Bašara, Mija Bašara, Melnička planina. Sobra verna družina, verna družina, dodvaje se i pet mladi momčina, dej vidite. Bašara, Mija
Evo grupa Cenje kaduj burum bila penje. Hai hai și hai hai. Că mă fac cu mai calunea, să-mi fie dragă lumea. Hai doarule, hai da ha. Mă mândrul o fac cu cioi, să ne iubim amândoi, numai nu.
Ai lume, măi, băsim, ăsta învețea de murit, nici o mândră n-o zile, măi. Păi să puiem în apă țolă, să mă întrebe de ce mor, să puiem în apă cap, să mă întrebe de ce zac, lume!
Hai hai și hai hai. Că pe mine nu vezi lele. Păi pe mâncare și pe bere. La lucru nu beau amiere. Hai lămuță și hai hai.
Our next speaker is Gena Traikova. She was editor-in-chief of the news department at BTV Media Group in Bulgaria, where she previously worked as a reporter, anchor, and producer. Prior to joining the BTV team, Gena was a reporter at Nova TV. She has specialized in CNN International and BBC Birmingham, and has produced several documentaries. We'll talk about one of them in a minute. Gena is the recipient of numerous documentary awards, as well as for her work as a reporter and TV producer. Without further ado, Gena, you have the floor.
First of all, I would like to take two thanks to the Bulgarian Cultural and Heritage Center of Seattle, to Ivan Tashev and the Opera School for making my participation possible. So really thank you. And also, I would like to take two thanks to Martin Kenin for Martin's help and support, and without his friendship, I wouldn't have been able to tell Valu's story. So thank you. I was born in the same year Voyager was launched. As a very small kid, my father always told me the story about this little spacecraft that will study the outer solar system and beyond. To this day, Voyager still remains the most distant human-made object from Earth, and its mission still fascinates me. Growing up, I was constantly filled with curiosity about that tiny space probe and its journey deep into the unknown universe. How many of you are familiar with Cosmos, Carl Sagan's Cosmos? Okay. Let's travel back to Bulgaria in 1984, when the country's state-owned television aired the famous Carl Sagan's TV series, Cosmos. This groundbreaking TV series explores different kinds of scientific subjects, from the origin of life to our place in the universe. It is the most popular TV series in history of the American public television. I do believe this. It has won 2 Emmys and a Peabody Award, and after his initial broadcasting, it has been aired in more than 60 countries and has been seen by more than 500 million people in the world. So, let's go back to 1984. Bulgaria was set deep behind the Iron Curtain. BNT was the only Bulgaria's TV station at that moment. On Sunday afternoon, BNT aired episode 11 of Cosmos TV series. And at the very end of the episode, Carl Sagan briefly talked about the golden record. And to the surprise of many viewers, one of Bulgaria's beloved folk songs, Izela Delu Hajdutin, suddenly played at the end of the American TV series. Now I'm going to show you the original recording that actually, just a piece of the original recording that Martin has had done. So, 7 years after the launch of Voyager probes, this was a moment of pride for many Bulgarians. I will be very short on this. A shock for singer Valia Balkanska and a public relations fiasco for the communist authorities. Then, no one in the country knew that Izela Delu Hajdutin was actually part of American scientific project intended to showcase the diversity of life and culture on Earth. Sorry about this. Okay. So, the Voyager record is a message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. Professor Carl Sagan's closing words were sounding, accompanied by the Bulgarian song. The recipients, if any, will understand the pictures and sounds incomplete at best, but one thing will be clear about us. No one sends such a message on such a journey without a positive passion for the future. At the time of its airing, Cosmos TV series were very popular in Bulgaria. As we discussed with Ivan yesterday, it was almost a family ritual to gather in the weekend to watch the series together. So for us, Professor Sagan's final words meant more than the thing he intended to. They were words for hope, words for freedom. So, instead of being prized, Valia got into trouble and was investigated. In the era of continuous East-West ideological confrontation, which also included a space race, the communist authorities wanted to know why and how she sold the Bulgarian cultural heritage to the Americans. The singer claimed she never even suspected that her voice was known beyond the country's border. I had the pleasure of meeting Valia 2 years before I started filming my documentary. We were in the Czech Republic, in a small village. She was performing in a local cathedral. The audience was mesmerized by her performance, by her voice, and by the haunting sound of the bagpipe. Even those who did not understand the Bulgarian lyrics were moved to tears by her performance. So, in this very moment, I decided that I wanted to tell Valia's story. The Bulgarian audience deserved to know how her song ended up on board Voyager. And this is how my documentary began to take its shape. I was trying to put all the pieces of the story together, And this is how I met Martin, who actually helped me to connect all the dots. Martin, for me, is one of the greatest ambassadors of the Bulgarian culture here in America. Martin actually discovered various talents, and without Martin's and Ethel's recording, Valia might have never been selected for the Golden Record on Voyager. Working on the story, I realized that Voyager mission was integral part of Valia's life story. The documentary basically shows the key moment of her life that actually defined her as an artist and as a human being. From her early performances as a little girl to her status now as a national icon, whose voice is traveling deep into space as an example of the best and the most beautiful and human nature. Now we can see the documentary.
Thank you, Hannah. And now let's see the documentary. So first, let me clarify. The original documentary is 55 minutes long. To show it to the American public, I had to make it shorter. So we are going to watch the shortened version of this documentary, which is less than 20 minutes long. But it has subtitles in English. Next,
This is Voyager launch control at T plus 20 minutes and 20-some seconds.
The vehicle is still doing just fine.
About 35 seconds remaining, and that's the first burn of the Centaur stage.
Годината е 1984. Единствената тогава телевизия у нас излъчва документалната поредица на професор Карл Сейгън «Космос».
Вярвам, че нашето бъдеще зависи от това колко добре познаваме този космос, през който се носим, подобно на прашинка в утринно небе. Започваме нашето пътешествие в космоса.
Симпатичният професор по астрофизика разказва от малкия екран как се е зародила Вселената, какво е станало след избухването на големия взрив, има ли живот на другите планети. До този момент никой у нас обаче все още не подозира, че вече 7 години частица от България лети на борда на Voyager в открития космос. Докато в 11-та серия със заглавие «Продължаване на паметта» не зазвучава българската песен «Излел е Дельо Хайдутин». Дельовата оттеква в ефир почти 2 минути и слага край на един от последните епизоди от американската поредица.
В фолклорната редакция на телевизията, тогава телевизията беше една, позвъня телефона. На слушалката някакъв тревожен глас изкомандва: слизай веднага в апаратната, защото в момента в международния ефир върви българска народна песен и никой не може да каже коя е песента и кой е изпълнява. Пред мониторите стояха цялото ръководно воинство на телевизията. На екрана вървеше звездна картина, звездна космическа картина, на фона на която звучеше българската народна песен. Подадоха ми 2 слушалки, сложих слушалките за пряко слушане на звука от ефир. Миг, 2 и аз веднага реагирах. Викам, това е Валя Балканска. и тя изпълнява родопската народна песен "Излел Делю Хайдут".
Отивам на работа през читалище Христо Ботев и много от хората бяха гледали филма. Честито бе, Валенко, ком честите бе, нито нова дреха, нито нова къща. Абе ти не знаеш ли? Какво да знае? Ти летиш в космоса. Как в космоса, аз ходя по земята? Макай тялом се на земята, духом си в космоса.
След това бях задължен да издиря от една страна селекцията, от друга страна къде се намира този запис. Явно, че той от нас е взет. Родопска певица с родопски кайдари. И тогава обиколих цяла България. Всички телевизионни центрове, в Благоевград, в Русе, в Варна, къде още, в Пловдив, в радиото в Стара Загора. Никъде нямаше този запис. И за мен и до ден днешен си остава този въпрос. Как този запис е попаднал в селекцията на изпратените в космоса записи?
Годината е 1977. През август и септември от космодрума във военно-въздушната база Кейп Канаверал последователно са изстреляни 2 космически апарата – Voyager 1 и 2. И двата апарата тогава са на старта на едно величествено пътешествие. Пътешествие, което ще ги отведе в периферията на Слънчевата система, а после и отвъд нея.
Voyager безспорно беше възможност, която се случва веднъж в живота.
В момента на изстрелването на космическата сонда, Джон Касани е ръководител на проекта. Разказва, че старта е бил най-напрегнатия момент за цялата мисия.
Моментът, в който се почувствах най-горд, беше изстрелването и на двата кораба. Те поеха по своя път и така първата част от мисията беше изпълнена. Трябваше да почакаме 10 години и да видим какво ще стане, но годините се оказаха цели 36.
Тогава Сюзан Дот е едва на 16. Години по-късно откритията на Voyager ще я вдъхновят да работи в сферата на космическите изследвания, а Voyager ще стане първата й мисия в лабораторията за реактивна тяга към Националната администрация за аеронавтика и космос, НАСА, в Пасадена, щата Калифорния.
Voyager трябваше да излети през 1977, защото тогава външните планети Юпитер, Сатурн, Уран и Нептун се бяха подредили по начин, който позволява на космически апарат да мине покрай всяка от тях в рамките на 12 години.
Да уловиш тези 4 планети в рамките на една мисия е възможност, която се появява само веднъж на 176 години.
Научната мисия на Voyager е да изследва планетите гиганти. Първо Юпитер и неговите луни, а после Сатурн и неговата система от пръстени.
Voyager ни разкри далечните планети. Ние нямахме представа какво има там. Знаехме, че Юпитер и Сатурн имат луни, но просто не ги бяхме виждали. Не можехме да ги видим добре с телескоп. Юпитер беше невероятен успех, защото ни разкри цялата Слънчева система отвъд Марс към външните планети, към планетите гиганти. Резултатите, които получихме по време на мисията, бяха зашеметяващи.
Само 2 години след като Валя Балканска научава, че песента й лети в космоса, втората сонда Voyager ще стигне Уран, а после и Нептун. Преди да се отправи със скорост от 80 500 км в час към най-ярката звезда в небето – Сириус. В началото на 77-ма, когато екипът от инженери изпипва финалните щрихи на сондата, Джон Касани решава, че корабът има нужда от нещо повече на борда – специално послание.
Карл беше част от проекта Voyager и един ден му казах: мисля, че трябва да имаме някаква плочка с послание върху нашия кораб. А той отговори: да, това е добра идея. Тогава аз казах: защо не предложиш нещо? Ако пък в един момент от далечното бъдеще Voyager срещне същества от друга цивилизация, той ще им предаде послание. Една грамофонна плоча, златна и крехка, с инструкции за използване. Тази плоча включва колекция от снимки, звуци, поздрави и час и половина изящна музика, най-големите хитове на Земята. Дар, прекосил целия океан на космоса, изпратен от един остров на цивилизацията на друг.
Един от хората, които стават част от екипа на Карл Сейгън и работят по съдържанието на златния диск, е Тимоти Ферис, бивш редактор на музикалното списание Rolling Stone, в момента почетен професор в университета в Бъркли. Той е натоварен с продуцирането на плочата.
Когато получихме отговор, имахме на разположение само няколко месеца. Бързо събрахме екип и започнахме да подбираме съдържанието на нещо, което щеше да съществува милиард години. Това е интересна времева динамика.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
Това беше начин да уловим човешкия дух и човечност и да ги изпратим в космоса с кораб, който сега пътува в междузвездното пространство.
Salvete quicumque estis. Bonam erga vos voluntatem habemus.
Как бихте написали писмо на някого, когато никога не сте срещали, но искате да му разкажете за себе си? Това определи съдържанието на Златната плоча.
Želimo vam sve najlepše sa naše planete.
Плочата включва приветствия на 55 човешки езика, както и поздравите на гърбатите китове. Запис на звуци, характерни за нашата планета, от най-ранните й дни до последния бум на новите технологии. 118 снимки на хора от различни раси и националности, които изпълняват специфични дейности. Информация, която е уникална за Земята, от молекулярната биология до историята на човешката цивилизация. Голяма част от посланията вероятно няма да бъдат разгадани, но онова, на което екипът от учени разчита като на универсално средство за комуникация, е музиката. На борда на Voyager има час и половина прекрасна музика от различни култури.
Плочата съдържа допълнително ръкописно послание на английски, което гласи: на създателите на музика от всички светове и от всички времена.
Всичко на плочата е добро, колкото Петата симфония на Бетовен. Така смятаме.
В селекцията на Златната плоча, редом до Моцарт, Бах, Бетовен и Стравински, попадат Чак Бери и Луис Армстронг, нощните заклинания на индианците от племето Навахо, песента на младо пигмейско момиче, грузинския хор Чакрулу, австралийска аборигенска песен, китайската песен Течащи потоци и арията на българската овчарка. Песента излел е Делю Хайдутин. Общо 27 произведения от цял свят и от различни епохи.
В самото начало на проекта, с още един човек, отидохме до музикалния магазин Tower Records на 6-то авеню в Манхатън. Купихме огромно количество плочи, предимно извън студийни записи от различни части на света. Една от тях беше колекция от българска фолклорна музика, която включваше едно много въздействащо произведение. Не помня кой пръв го чу и го предложи, но бързо стана ясно, че е нещо прекрасно.
Каква беше първата ви реакция, когато чухте българската песен?
Настръхнаха ми космите на врата. Звукът беше приказен. В тази песен има толкова много мощ. Тя ми напомни за времената преди звукозаписа, когато певецът наистина трябваше да изнесе гласа си, когато певецът наистина беше певец.
Прослушвани са по 50. Преслушат 50 песни, върнат се на тази. Пак 50, пак между 250 и повече песни. И тогава Андреян, съпругата на Карл Сейгън, казала: мен това ми звучи най-земно и най-небесно. И ме хваща нещо като на танц.
Тази песен просто е от друг свят. Тя не е само страхотно изпълнение. Песента сама по себе си е толкова някъде там, разбирате ли? Самото усещане, което носи със себе си, е извънземно по някакъв начин.
Следите на българската песен ни отвеждат до Сиатъл. Причината Делювата да попадне на борда на Voyager е една плоча, случайно закупена от музикален магазин в Ню Йорк. В основата на нейния запис обаче е един американец, дълбоко свързан с народното творчество на Балканите. Този човек е Мартин Кейник.
Аз нямах нищо общо с това. Всъщност, аз и Етел допринесохме за качването на Вален на Voyager, само с това, че издадохме плоча с български песни с изпълнението й. Оттам нататък, знанията ми за събитията са доста мъгляви. С Етел чухме за това единствено, когато ни се обадиха, за да ни попитат дали може да използват нашия запис. Откъде са го взели, как са го чули, нямам представа.
Тази история започва през далечната 1965 година от България. Тогава фолклористът Етел Райм за първи път чува изпълнението на Валя на фестивала на народното творчество в Копривщица. 3 години по-късно Етел Райм и Мартин Кейник ще получат разрешение от Комитета за приятелство и културни връзки с чужбина да съберат материали и да издадат 2 грамофонни плочи за американската публика.
Едно от първите места, където искахме да отидем, беше Смолян, за да запишем Валя. Още от времето, когато Етел я беше чула за първи път, беше изключително впечатлена. Когато аз я чух, Валя беше просто фантастична.
При пристигането си, двамата са посъветвани да запишат друга певица. Те обаче остават непреклонни и заминават за Смолян. Записът на песента, която лети в космоса, всъщност е осъществен в полеви условия в една обикновена класна стая.
Беше просто една малка стая с нисък таван. Беше най-лошото място за записа. Но там се случи.
На записа присъстват тогава 19-годишният Николай Атанасов. По това време неговият баща Вергилий Атанасов завежда отдел звукозапис на Института по музика към БАН. Той помага на Мартин Кейник да издири материалите за 2 плочи.
Бях нещо като скриптър. Водих бележки за това кого записваме, къде, как се казва, на колко години е. И това са точно тези бележки в момента от записа с Валя Балканска. Спомням се го, като че ли беше вчера. Мога и датата да ви кажа. 25 юни 1968 година. Най-напред дойдоха 2 гайдари. 2 тогава най-добри родопски гайдари. Стефан Захманов и Лазар Каневски.
И 2 покойници, невероятни гайдари. А Бай Димитър беше, какво да кажа, виртуоз.
С нас беше дошъл тон-режисьорът Дейвид Джонс, който до тогава не беше записвал български материал, но беше магьосник на звука. Той разбираше звука много добре. Той ги постави в дъното на стаята, за да може да са максимално далеч от микрофоните и да не заглушават певицата. Тя беше млада, силна и когато я записахме, направихме само 1 дубъл. Без никаква репетиция, без никаква проба, те явно са свирили и са пяли заедно на времето. Започнаха и тя изпя "Излява Делюха и Дутин" по такъв начин, по който след това не е могла да го изпее изобщо отново.
Когато 2 плочи с българска музика "В сянката на планината" и "Жътва овчар и булка" излизат на американския пазар, Мартин Кейник изпраща по 1 копие до всяко населено място и всеки изпълнител. Но нито една от плочите не успява да премине желязната завеса и да стигне до нас. След включването на песента в селекцията на златната плоча на Voyager, Кейник уведомява тогавашния комитет за културни връзки с чужбина. Но ще трябва да минат цели 7 години преди новината да стане публично достояние в България. През август 2012 година Voyager отвори нова страница в човешката история. 36 години след изстрелването си от Земята, космическата сонда се превърна в първия апарат, произведен от човека, който е напуснал пределите на Слънчевата система. А на борда на Voyager, там някъде сред звездите, завинаги ще се носи и една българска песен.
Записът на Voyager е послание в бутилка, хвърлена в космическия океан. То съдържа някои наши мисли и чувства, част от информацията, която съхраняваме в гени, мозък и книги. Получателите, ако има такива, ще разберат картините и звуците частично в най-добрия случай. Но едно нещо ще им стане ясно за нас. Никой не изпраща такова послание на такова пътешествие без положителна нагласа за бъдещето. При всички възможни тълкования на съобщението, те ще бъдат сигурни, че ние сме вид надарен с надежда и упоритост, поне мъничко разум и копнеж да осъществи контакт.